Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is Dr. Hickman, and I'm coming to you guys to talk to you about Chapter 9, Where to, the little acronym to talk about how to plan your instruction. That's planning for teaching, planning for learning. So we're going to jump right into this. There'll be multiple videos to go over this because I only have 15 minutes, and there's a lot to cover. I first want to cover the questions that you need to critique stages 1 and 2, just for a little recap. Remember, stage 1 is all about framing those big ideas, those big questions, setting out your goals, the goals that you have for students, transfer goals that you're targeting, what meaning making needs to go on to get big understandings and cover big ideas. The essential questions that we've been talking about probably now for the past 3 or 4 weeks. And then, as a part of those essential questions, what do you want them to keep thinking about throughout the course of the lesson, throughout the course of the unit in class? And then, what established goals and standards are targeted? If you're looking at state standards, if you're looking at certain goals that your school district has decided are very important. So, how do you go about answering those questions as you critique your stage 1? And then with stage 2, remember we're talking about assessments, so and creating assessments and creating rubrics in terms of how you're going to assess those things. So what performances and products will actually show evidence that they made meaning, they were able to make meaning and transfer the knowledge, and then creating the rubric to make sure you can see what exactly it is that they've done. And then what additional evidence will you collect through a quiz or a test or a some other formative assessment, maybe talking to the students in a one-on-one conference, which is something that you could do in an ELA class as you go over a paper with students, or go over somebody's essay or project or what have you. And then also, are the assessments aligned to stage 1 elements? I know for many of you, I talked about making sure that your stuff is vertically aligned as you go from stage 1 to stage 2. And so then we're going to also make sure that that's the case here with stage 3. Are all of these things aligned so that your finished product makes sense and is cohesive and clear to your students? So let's jump into stage 3. Like I said, stage 3, the acronym is Where to. And so as we get into this, we're talking about planning learning activities. And this is where the magic happens, ladies and gentlemen. Stage 3 is where and when you plan how it is that you're going to teach. We know stage 1 provided that broader framework to focus the unit and lesson. And stage 1 is about the what and the why. Stage 2 is about the assessments so how it is you're going to know what it is that the students know and understand, how you're going to evaluate it, how you're going to measure it. Stage 3 is the verb. This is how you go about doing it. What is your plan for students to learn? How will you get to the understandings that you crafted in stage 1? And how will you get them to demonstrate mastery and level from your stage 2? You got to set up goals here, ladies and gentlemen. And so your goal should be for everybody to get an A. That's what you're trying to teach towards. So this is about how it is you're going to make sure that all students get an A. That's very important. And in here, although this is about your teaching, you don't want to think about your teaching per se. You want to think more about how it is that the students learn. So as you talk about how students learn, or you think about that, think about how do students learn? What is the best environment for students to learn in? Things we know need to be clear. They need to have real world applications. Are you providing models, modeling, all of those things? So you want to make sure that you are providing a safe environment for students. That's so critical. And by safe, I don't mean just physically safe. That's important. The desks need to be lined up or in a manner in which students don't get hurt. You don't, for my science folks, you may want to make sure that people aren't getting acid thrown in their faces and, burning themselves up with the Bunsen burners. They still have Bunsen burners. I'm assuming they do. But anyway, so you want to make sure you have that type of safe physical environment, but you also want to make sure that the environment is, emotionally safe, mentally safe. Do students feel like this is an environment where they can be successful? And also, are you and are their classmates supporting them to be successful? That's very important. that young people come to your class and feel like you want them to be successful and be the best version of themselves in your class. So to that end, make sure you're not putting kids down. It sounds like I shouldn't have to say it, but I do because I've seen it. Don't put your kids down. Don't talk bad about them. Try not to use sarcasm. It can cut. Some kids do not understand. They don't have that mental maturity. I shouldn't even call it maturity, but they might not know how to internalize sarcasm. So you have to be careful with that. And again, make sure that you're not talking about students, and don't let the students talk bad about each other either. That does not create a safe environment. I'm not going to say bullying. Bullying is an overused term in education, but people can have good manners. So you should expect that your students have good manners when they come into class. So your learning plan should make sure things are effective and engaging. For whatever reason, there are a lot of E's in this particular chapter, so I'm going to be using the E words throughout. But are you going to be able to engage diverse learners? You're going to have 25, 30, 35 students in the classroom, all of them think and teach differently. Are you going to be able to engage all of them? In a couple other videos for this week, you're going to take a look at how people learn differently, multiple intelligences. There's also visual learners, audio learners, kinesthetic learners. Some of that might be a little uncomfortable for you maybe to have students up and moving about. Say in your social studies class as part of the learning process, maybe they're doing a gallery walk. But some students learn better like that. And you might have to provide them an opportunity to learn in that fashion. And then also, are they fascinated by what you're teaching? Are they energized by it? But then also, it's how it is that you're teaching. Are you helping your learners to become more competent and productive at worthy work in a clear, concise manner that's not taking 2 weeks to do something that could have been done in 2 days? Because you know what best practices are and you know how to implement those best practices. So the first part of the where to is the W. And I don't know if you guys can tell, but the W here is bigger than the other letters. So clear goals. You need to make sure that you have clear goals. Clear expectations was the buzzword when I first started teaching so many years ago. So are your goals clear? Do students know what it is that is expected of them for this particular unit? And can they tell you why they are learning it? When I was a principal, anytime I did an observation, I would go in, I'd look at the teacher for, see what they were doing, get a feel for the class, write down if I saw the objectives on the board, things of that nature. I'm listening for what the teachers are saying, how they're saying it. Are the students working in groups? Did they tell them what they were going to do prior to? But then I'd go around to each student, not to each student, but to a few students in the class, and I'd ask them, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? Now, I always made sure I went to that student who looked like they were staring off in space, and I asked them, what are you doing and why are you doing it? That's letting me know how thorough the teacher was in being clear and letting them know what was going to happen. As part of the where to is you want to make sure that your students, you want to determine what their prior knowledge is, what are possible misconceptions that they might have, and then provide them with meaningful activities, experiences, knowledge, and skills. Understanding where their misconceptions might show up can be very powerful, so you want to make sure that you consider that, because you can teach through mistakes. And if you're able to see where mistakes are ahead of time, you know that students might have a problem with meiosis and mitosis. And if you know that ahead of time, then you should be able to really focus on how it is you're going to get them to learn that, and maybe spend extra time or attack that in a very different manner. Maybe this is where you get some kinesthetic learning together so it can show that transfer of the movement of cells. And if I'm wrong here, biology folks, pardon me, but I know that those things deal with cells going from one place to another. Maybe that's an opportunity for you to use kinesthetic learning. So at this point, in terms of your planning, again, you want to talk about what's the point? Why is this worth teaching? Why does this content matter? What about this topic is most important and is most interesting? And then what about this subject captures your attention and what captures your students' attention? But it's all not worthy and it all does not matter. That's critical. Just because you think it's the most important thing on since sliced bread doesn't make it so, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's something that students need to learn. And this is a trap a lot of social studies teachers fall into. They can get lost in the weeds and want to teach every little minute detail, or teach about some topic that they find very interesting, but really the students will forget as soon as they walk out of your class. So you need to make that determination. Just because it's something that you enjoy, is whether or not that's something that the students are going to enjoy. Now, at the same time, if you enjoy it, this might be something that you really are passionate about and you really get the students involved. So it's a fine line that you're really going to have to walk as it relates to that. But again, make sure what you're teaching is worthy. Make sure that this is something that the students need to spend time doing. And you have a lot of power in this situation, because a lot of the ideas in UBD are they're very subjective. They're open to a lot of interpretation. You're talking about a big idea or understanding. Although there are 6 facets to understanding, you still get to determine what it is the students understand. What's essential, what's non-essential, what's worthy, what's not worthy. You, as the learning planner, as you plan the learning, you get to determine all those things. But you have to make sure that what you want the students to learn, it makes sense for them to learn it, that it's worthy, that it's something that you want them to consider, knowledge that you want them to continue to have throughout the rest of your course, that it's relevant for that, but then also, when possible and applicable, outside of your class as well. So to that end, you want to talk about your expectations. What are the performance task requirements? So you're going to want to go over the rubrics. You want to show models and exemplars. English folks, you can show them an A paper, what an A paper looks like in your class, what an A lab report looks like in your class, what's the end result. You might even want to get the students to help create the rubric, and establish whatever it is, what does good work look like, and have them talk about, okay, in an essay, this is what a good essay should look like. This is what a safe lab should look like. And then as far as establishing the goals, directly state them at the start of the unit, or you can do it at the start of the class through a syllabus. You can get students to generate questions about the particular unit or lesson or class, so that you guys can establish goals from that. And then you can also ask students to identify personal goals, and then make sure you hold them accountable for that. I would have my students do that and say, all right, what grade do you want in this class? I want a B. All right, with a B, that means you got to do minimum 80% of the work proficiently. And so I would tell them, you set a specific goal. Now you need to make sure that you align up the time that you spend and the effort that you spend to meet that particular goal. Then you hold them accountable for it. And you get them to hold themselves accountable for it. So then at the same time, you want to talk about relevance. Tell the students why they need to learn this. Discuss how it's beneficial to them. How can they use this beyond the classroom, to learn in some form or fashion? And one way I would do this would be to make sure I had all of my students do a formal presentation. And I told them, you might not use this, and you might not have a job or a position where you have to do a formal presentation, but you might in life. You might have to stand up at somebody's wedding, or God forbid, you might have to eulogize somebody at a funeral. And I had to do that for a very close friend of mine, and I relied on my training that I had as a formal speaker to get through that. So that's important. And in terms of diagnosing what students know at the beginning, give a pre-test, give a diagnostic skills test, see what it is that they already know prior to the unit starting. Give them a graphic organizer to show what it is that they're thinking at the beginning of the unit. And then also, as I mentioned before, you can teach through misconceptions and mistakes. So that can be very important. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to pick up in the next video with the H. I don't know if you can see there that it's bigger, but this will be the H section coming up, and then I'll get through the other letters as well. So pick up with me on the other side.